Terrorism's up here. It's in the mind.
I think that disaster can strike any place at any time that causes fear. That's something that causes fear in us that we're not expecting. I mean, it is an attack on somebody or something to create fear.
Well, I think it is any time someone attacks an innocent group of people who's living their lives and all their everyday lives in order to make a political statement. And the people that they hurt does not matter to them. That it doesn't matter to them that they hurt innocent children, that they hurt families, and they hurt people living their everyday normal life. And we take for granted, I think, in this country a lot, the freedom that we had. And that's the reason I think Oklahoma City was such a shock to this world, is because if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere.
Well, at the BBC, the use of language is taken very seriously, and you have to be very careful not to use something that is inflammatory. We find this whether it's dealing with people in Northern Ireland or people in the Middle East. You have to be very careful about the way you frame your language, because you don't want to incite difficulties, and you don't want people to be, you don't want to cause more problems on the ground because you've unwisely chosen the wrong word. You have to be very clear about what identifiers you use. Some people would use the term freedom fighter in certain situations, for example. And it's a debate that's always ongoing. But at the BBC we have an editorial policy chief, and it's his job to give us guidelines in any given situation as to what word would be appropriate to use. And we're governed by that because it's a decision that needs to be taken at the very highest level. You know, you cannot take this lightly. It's a very, very important phrase, and when you choose to use it, you've got to be absolutely sure what you mean.
And for me, it was gut-wrenching because this was my hometown. This is the place where I worked. These are people I knew, and it happened in my hometown. Terrorism. I'd seen terrorism in the name of God and in the name of some political principle for decades, going back to El Salvador and then into Beirut. I'd seen it in the Balkans. I'd seen it in Asia. I'd seen it everywhere, but it happened in my hometown. For some reason, I thought that we were immune to this here, and we found out that we weren't. And we also found out very quickly that terrorists can be white and Christian, not just Muslim. And we didn't recognize the fact that in our own country we had a cauldron of hate that was forming, was boiling in the militia movement, Christian identity movement, neo-Nazis. So when I got here, the thing I'll never forget, and day two, what really struck me is, and I don't want to make you ill here, but there is the smell of death, and I smell that everywhere. And to smell that in my hometown is something that has stuck with me forever. So I go into the Federal Reformatory in El Reno. We're sitting at a conference table. It wasn't behind a glass. They brought him in. Stephen Jones was there. Another attorney was there. And McVeigh was brought in.
Were you by yourself, or did you have a field producer?
I was by myself.
Yeah.
Just one person. And I noted as soon as he walked in, he was very tall, but he was very affable. When he came in, he seemed like he had a smile on his face, and he talked to you with the respectiveness respectfulness of a person, pardon me, with the tone of a respectful young man. Called me sir, He was very polite, and we immediately started talking about the Gulf War, the first Gulf War in '91, because he was a veteran. And are any of you veterans, by the way? Okay. And where did you serve?
I did OIF 2, and then I did Operation 9 during Freedom 3.
Did you? Wow, okay. So he was, I have a lot of vets in my terrorism class, so that's why I was asking. And we talked about that, but I wanted to start trying to push his buttons, and it wasn't very difficult. And that's why I say it's up here in the mind, because immediately when I brought up his feelings about the government, I mentioned the government and Clinton, you could see a light switch turn on. And you could see the hate come into his eyes. And he started going on about how the government was illegitimate and the government was taking away the rights of the people and selling off this country. He went into a rage on the government. And I thought when I heard that, I said, there's no way they're going to put him on camera.
I think it's so important about the Oklahoma City National Memorial Museum is that we try to put a human face to terrorism. I think sometimes you go into these places and you expect terror stories coming out of Baghdad. Well, people didn't expect terror stories coming out of Oklahoma City. So all of a sudden you see these kids' faces and these moms and dads' faces. Well, it's really no different than Baghdad. I mean, they've got parents and kids there that die of terrorism events every day. But we want to put a human face to terrorism. We want to put the human toll of what we're losing, the freedoms we're losing, the cost terrorism has on our lives, and kind of the impact of what these mad men and women who are doing crazy things around the world have on our everyday lives.
I think that, I think that has been a question from the very beginning, and I think the difference, what really protected that, to protect that integrity of the memorial is the fact that we did have family members, survivors, rescue workers on every single committee. We had consultants that told us you can't do it that way. That you cannot have people that are so entrenched in this raw emotion to be part of this process. And those consultants were sent on their way because we made the emphasis, like one of our board members said it so, I think, profoundly, is that we promised that you would be a part of this process, and in Oklahoma, if you make a promise, you keep it. So that was, I think, a very strong statement as to how it's done. So when we started in, from the very beginning, we had to have the perpetrators, we had to tell the story. But if you'll notice, that's not the highlight of this museum as you walk through. And to this very day, we recently just kind of went through a process to focus on the lessons that are here in Oklahoma City. We focused on what we will do, what we will not do. One thing we will not do is ever tell the story of the perpetrator without including the stories of the family members and survivors and rescue workers also. And that's very important to us.